The Toronto Blue Jays just cannot figure out the Seattle Mariners, and T-Mobile Park has become the new Tropicana field for the Toronto Blue Jays. Manager John Schneider, he's been in hot water for the past couple days, and he's made a couple of questionable decisions. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Excuse my voice, I'm a little bit out of it today. Just getting back from Seattle. Not going to be going to the game today, but back in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. Going to watch the game a bit later today, but a couple of tough losses for the Jays, Nick. And, maybe some things got to change here. Manager John Schneider has made a couple of questionable decisions that we're going to break down more in depth in this video, but it hasn't been a good showing thus far in Seattle.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that these are the two. This is the series you went to see in person, but it's been nothing short of a disaster. Now, the games have been fun to watch up until the Jays lost. It's been really exciting. The atmosphere apparently in there was really, really good. But the Jays just keep finding different ways, more heartbreaking ways to lose. And let's just get right into it. Before we do, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And the goal of this video, we're going to be discussing John Schneider because people on Twitter, people around Jays Nation are starting to get a little bit fed up with some of his decisions. And it's kind of poetic that last year around, this time, wasn't exactly this time, manager Charlie Montoyo was fired for John Schneider after getting swept by the Seattle Mariners in a 4-game series. Now, do we think John Schneider's going to get fired? I don't know. I wouldn't really think so, but just so many questionable decisions out of him, Peter. And I don't know who's making these calls, whether it's purely John Schneider, whether it's a combination. Who knows about the analytics department even, but there's just, I don't know if he's overthinking it or what's happening. We'll break down a few of the things, but he has not been good this series at all. And maybe it's just a Seattle curse following his nightmare wildcard Game 2 performance out of John Schneider there.
It could be that, Nick. It could definitely be that. But what made John Schneider successful once he took over the manager role for Charlie Montoyo was that he was playing his gut feelings and he was going with what was working. And some of these decisions that he's making, it feels like they're predetermined. Like whatever happens in the game, it doesn't matter. We're going to do this, and they're following a code of sorts. And I don't like that. Maybe you do pitch to Teoscar Hernandez late in the game the other day, but he was 2 for 2 at that point, or 2 for 3, or 3 for 3, whatever he was. He was hitting the ball well, and then he ends up burning you and he walks you off. So that's a decision that will never make sense to me. Not walking Teoscar Hernandez. Then you leave Nate Pearson in a little bit too long yesterday. It's just things of that nature. Danny Jansen not pinch hitting yesterday. Like, what are we doing here? You got to be able to work within the flow of a game, and John Schneider has not shown the ability to do that lately.
And even not pinch running for Brandon Belt in Game 1.
Right.
Pinch hitting for Alejandro Kirk when it makes zero sense. The pitcher who, you bring up obviously Alejandro Kirk to pinch hit, but the pitcher's known to be a ground ball pitcher in Saucedo. Obvious double play, and Kirk's never going to outrun a double play. And the ball he hit, you say Jordan Luplow was in there, he probably would have outran it. But he had this to say after yesterday's heartbreaking loss. John Schneider said the bullpen's workload catches up at times, and it's baseball. It works out like that sometimes. Sooner or later, we're going to play in a sync for quite a while, and we're going to be going on a nice little roll. And then he also said, this is exactly what John Schneider talks about, being in sync. Of course, yesterday the offense put it together, and the bullpen, which is a staple all season, collapsed. But, I understand what John Schneider is saying here, and it does make sense. The Jays do need to find a sync, but at some point, you can put, a manager can only have so much impact on a game, but I feel like we've talked about him so much this season, and specifically this series. Just a few questionable decisions. Pinch hitting Danny Jansen yesterday for Kevin Kiermaier definitely would have made sense, especially because Danny Jansen's a guy who pulls the ball a lot, gets the ball deep in the air, could have been a sac fly. There's just so many different things. And again, managing a baseball game is very, very hard. I can't pretend like I can do it, but when everyone in Jays land, and even like all of our friends, you kind of come together with a consensus move, you'd like to think that maybe the manager's overthinking it a little bit, or maybe the analytics department is, whoever's making the call. We're just putting it on John Schneider because that's who, I guess, is the puppet right now, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, there's definitely more than one voice going into these decisions. But like I said before, I feel like they're all thought out and they're predetermined, which is not a way to manage a baseball game. You got to be able to manage in the flow of a game. If a guy doesn't have it, you got to realize that, and you got to make a change. And we're talking about Danny Jansen pinch hitting. I would have brought him in for Kevin Biggio yesterday. Obviously, it worked out, and Biggio got on base, but that's who I would have put in at that spot. And everyone in the crowd was chanting for that. They wanted Jansen to come in and hit in that spot in the game. It's just things like that. He's afraid to pull the trigger on certain moves, and I've been a lot more lenient on John Schneider this year than you have, Nick. You've been very quick to call him out, and I said give him time. He's just feeling out the team, but right now you're almost 100 games into the season. It's not a feeling out process anymore. You got to be very conviction heavy in your decisions. You got to have conviction with your decisions, with your play as a team, and they just haven't done that thus far.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of room for error, especially right now. Like you said, almost 100 games in, we're fighting for a playoff spot. And touching on yesterday's game, like the offense was phenomenal. Bo Bichette's on a bit of a cold streak here now. He hasn't been doing great this series. But putting that aside, Vladdy did his thing. Brandon Belt's been on fire. A great sign as well as Alejandro Kirk, who has honestly been on a bit of a hot streak aside from his double play ground out there. And from the pitching staff, Kesman Gosman didn't have his best stuff, but you're looking at the bullpen here. A lineup of Nate Pearson, Jimmy Garcia, Jay Jackson. Some people argued whether you should put Jimmy Garcia back in there. And all I know is that Jay Jackson is a phenomenal pitcher. I don't want to see him get called down once Genesis Cabrera gets up. But like you said, John Schneider needs to be a bit more on top of things and play the game and just feel the game a bit more because, I don't know, just a few of the moves. There shouldn't be that many moves that are objectively questionable, at least in my opinion. I mean, maybe, again, they use stats and analytics and stuff like that, but even something like pinch running for Brandon Belt in game one, I don't know why you wouldn't. I'm sure he has a reason for it, but I don't know. He's starting to, Blue Jays Nation is collectively starting to come together, and I don't think they fire him. They just gave him a 3-year contract, but something needs to change, and I don't know how many games you can attribute to John Schneider for us losing, if really any, but it's getting a bit bad here.
Yeah, well, if he keeps costing them games, Nick, it doesn't matter how long his contract is because the Blue Jays want to win this year, and they have what it takes to win this year. So if they think John Schneider isn't the guy going forward, then I see no reason as to why they can't get rid of him. And another thing that stuck out to me was pulling Yusei Kikuchi in game one. He only had 78 pitches through, I believe, 6 innings. He was carving. It might have been his best outing as a Blue Jay. And John Schneider, game in, game out, talks about how the bullpen is so taxed and they need days off. And then you're going ahead and pitching Trevor Richards for 2 innings. It just doesn't make sense to me. You're complaining about one thing and then you're feeding into that complaint. So you got to be a little bit more ruthless in your decision making. You can't worry about guys' feelings so much. And John Schneider's been kind of in the middle all season long. He doesn't want to take accountability for the mistakes, and he doesn't want to put any of the blame on his players either. But at some point, sooner rather than later, you got to pick a side, and you got to know when to call some guys out and when to take some blame as well.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, John Schneider, he didn't cause Nate Pearson to have an absolute, blow up. And some people were saying, obviously, Kevin Gosman didn't.
Maybe he did.
Well,
maybe he did. Maybe he was the one calling some pitches. It was just. It's been all around a disaster 2 games for the Toronto Blue Jays. Still a great atmosphere. I'm still very happy that I got to go there. But come on, man. You can't keep letting these games slip away because you're in the middle of a playoff race. And one bad week of baseball, you're on the outside looking in.
Yeah, it doesn't get easier with the Dodgers. And the Jays are still in a very, very, solid spot, but they need to pick it up very, very quickly. And that's not going to happen with outings like that from Nate Pearson and some questionable pitching calls. A 0-2 changeup to Teoscar Hernandez doesn't make any sense either when Nate Pearson throws 101 miles an hour. But I'll leave it there. Hopefully Kevin Gosman can, continue to get a bit healthier because he didn't look the best out there. He battled, and it goes to show how good of a pitcher he truly is when he's throwing 91 miles per hour and still ultimately got the job done. But that'll wrap up the video. Let us know if you think John Schneider is on the hot seat or if he should, get some more time as the Blue Jays manager. But that'll wrap it up. The Jays need a win today. It's as simple as that. We'll see you guys tomorrow.